Uh, Good morning, members. Welcome to this meeting of the Isle of Skye and Raasay Committee. It's just to let members know that this meeting will be recorded, and the recording will be available for viewing after the meeting on the Highland Council's YouTube channel. So, just to let you know that this morning, the Chairman, Councillor Gordon, has given us apologies for today's meeting, and therefore we need an interim chair to be appointed for this meeting. So can I ask members for a nomination for interim chair, please?
Thank you, Alistair. Can I nominate Councillor Finlayson as chair for this morning's committee meeting?
And I'm happy to second that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, members. I'll now hand over to Councillor Finlayson.
Okay, thank you all. Matthew Van, agus Bria Muyan Jew, agus Falchi Goon, a committee, Skye and Raasay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Isle of Skye and Raasay Committee. I'd like to welcome everyone to this committee on this beautiful day. I'm sure we all want to get through the committee and maybe some of us will get out into the sunshine. So I'll go over to you first, Alistair, and ask for apologies for absence. Anyone else apart from Councillor Gordon?
No, Chair.
No. Okay. And declarations of interest, please.
Yes, Chair. Thank you. I've received some declarations of interest from Councillor Callum Monroe. A financial interest in item 5, as his wife is a Gaelic medium teacher working part-time in a school in the area. Also a financial interest in item 8 as the joint owner of a self-catering business. Having considered the nature of the reports presented today and having applied the test as described in paragraph 5.3 of the Councillor's Code of Conduct, Councillor Monroe will remain in the meeting and take part in these items. Councillor Monroe has also a non-financial interest in item 7 as a trustee of a community trust which will participate in the development of an investment plan for Skye and Raasay. Also, having applied the test in paragraph 5.3 of the Councillor's Code of Conduct, Councillor Monroe will remain in the meeting and take part in this item. And that's it, Chair. Okay, thank you very much, Alistair. Okay, if we move on to agenda item number 3, the minutes of the last meeting of the Skye and Raasay Committee, which was held on the 29th of March. These were approved at the Highland Council meeting held on the 13th of May. So we need to take no further action. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item 4, the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Local Committee performance. And I'm delighted to welcome Mike Collier, Group Commander, to this meeting. And I think Mike's also got someone else with him, Raymond King, who Mike will introduce. So I'll hand directly over to you, Mike, and you can introduce Raymond and you can talk to the report.
Hi, good morning, Chair. Thank you very much for that, and I hope you're all well on this lovely day. Yes, I've asked Raymond to attend today because Raymond's the Station Commander for Skye and Raasay, so it gives him an overview of where we are, and if we've got any local issues, he can discuss them with you at that time as well. So I'll quickly go through what I've got in front of me today. So it's an end of year report. So many thanks for the opportunity to do this today for the year 2020-21. Overall, a positive report, low incident count for the area. This has been influenced by events of this year in relation to the pandemic, along with a reduction in tourism and numbers and traffic. We've also had a reduced number of secondary fires, including wildfires, due to media campaigns directed at landowners and the risk of infectious transmission via the pandemic to emergency services personnel. This was predominantly relevant in the initial impact of COVID in Q1, and several incidents identified in Q4 were over a short time frame. The following current key performance indicators are how we assess our performance at this time. Accidental dwelling fires. We had 4 ADFs, which were relatively minor incidents. Chimney, overheating, cooking, not required any serious intervention with no casualties. The committee area has one casualty and no fatalities in the 5-year trend, which is extremely positive, indicative of the ongoing work by SFRS and partners to act on prevention and protection for our communities. Deliberate fires, we had 3 deliberate fires, which were 2 refuse and 1 outdoor. No issues or increases in trends or patterns over the 5-year period and well below the SFRS Highland stats. Road traffic collisions, we had 9 for the area, a spike in November of 3. The majority were standby or make safe with 3 extrications. Casualties low in number, no significant injuries. Number down on 5-year trend, and as highlighted previously, this was probably due to the pandemic and the reduced numbers travelling in the area. Significantly better than the SFRS Highland reporting area. False alarms, which we take as unwanted fire alarm signals, predominantly in our care homes, schools, etc. And we had 43 for the area, and they vary across a number of different establishments. A number of repeat offenders who don't quite meet the criteria for intervention. However, guidance and advice is always provided where appropriate to reduce these calls. The top 3 offenders tend to be a residential hotel, care home, and secondary schools. It's a downward trend and well below the figures for the SFRS Highland. Station availability, this is one of the ones that we're finding more challenging now going forward, and we've talked about this for a couple of years now in the recruitment and retention aspect. The committee area station availability remains positive across 4 of our stations, and due to recent recruitment successes, which Raymond's been a large part of, staffing in Uig, we should see an improvement over the following year as trainees are developed. However, we will also have a significant number of resignations and retirements, which will impact upon Broadford and Poultry in particular. We continue to proactively recruit, but face continual challenges in recruiting and retaining personnel. It's also a national issue at this time due to age profiles of current personnel in RDS. We continue to work with our partners to improve local outcomes for our communities and have tasked Station Commander King to resume multi-agency training and practices as we exit our strict controls during the pandemic. So hopefully as we move into that, we'll have an opportunity then to be more visible, and will be an opportunity to attract more people to the service as well. And a small information of note, alongside our partners, as you will no doubt all be aware as local councillors, we're seeking alternative options for a station build within Poultry. This has been arranged by HIE and the Scottish Futures Trust. Our current facility at Poultry is considered to be end of life, and I'm quite content to say that now. We anticipate that a multi-agency build will be established. We're looking at various options and consider the best outcome, and I would like to hope that this may assist in recruitment as we progress. I will also prepare options plans for maybe various options of how we run that station going forward as well, and put them forward to our board. So there'll be multi-agency partner joint builds, and we also have an opportunity for staffing in Uig to be looked at as well in the longer term. There is a 6-year development plan for Skye, which we're going to look at for our stations, and as these progress, I'll keep you informed. So that concludes my submission for Skye and Raasay, and I'm happy to take any questions should there be so at this time.
Okay, as always, Mike, thank you very much for that report. And it's just to say that in relation to the station in Poultry and the relocation, members, of course, have been involved in discussions about that and creating some sort of blue light centre out with the centre of the town. And obviously, where you're sited is probably the worst place you could be. So we look forward to moving things forward there. Before I go to other members, my age-old question is also about that whole thing around age and recruitment of young people, and that recruitment at high school. Are we going into the high school often enough? Are we encouraging out young people? And has there been any discussion nationally about changing the age of when young people could join the volunteer fire service? So maybe we'll go down to all the members and you can come back and answer all the questions maybe in one go. So
right, okay, I'll take a note then.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor MacLeod next.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mike. Good morning, Raymond. Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned about a successful campaign regarding deterring people from, particularly landlords, from wildfires. Just coming into obviously an increase in tourism, which is very welcome. I just wondered if there was any such initiative to sort of bring awareness for people that are maybe wild camping, etc.
Okay. You're on mute, John.
I'll go to Councillor Monroe and then Mike can come back and answer. Callum?
Thank you, Chair. Morning, Mike and Raymond. Good to have you with us. Just want to acknowledge the Scottish Fire and Rescue Services work in the last year. It's a positive report, as you say, Mike, and I just acknowledge the difficulties and the challenges with our stations in Skye. Hopefully, you're developing trainees, as you say, but there are challenges, and we're interested to hear going forward your 6-year development plan and how that pans out. So just acknowledge all your efforts and thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Okay, back to you, Mike.
So, Chair, if I was to take these in turn, your initial questions about the age of recruits, highly unlikely that'll ever change. 18 years where we look at bringing them in at. It's probably, in fact, I know it will do to legislative requirements for employees of young persons, etc. It's much more challenging to take on a young person under the Employment Act than it is to somebody 18. So we have to be very conscious of that, particularly in the environment we may put them into as firefighters. So I don't anticipate that changing at this time. The engagement with the younger people in the community, and Raymond's nodding, and you know, I'll maybe pass across to Raymond a little bit, but that is extremely challenging. And I think there's an apathy from the younger generation towards the on-call retained firefighter model. Whether we need to have a look at the particular model we have in place and whether we can review that and say, is there something we could do as an alternative that would make it more attractive? Nationally, we are looking at, we have a retained volunteer duty system strategy team in place who, because this is not an issue just for Highland, if I was to tell you, you know, that we have over 200 vacancies in our RDS in Highland alone, you take that and extrapolate that across the whole of Scotland, you can imagine that figure is phenomenally large. So we've got a national problem we need to deal with, which has been looked at. So I would hope that over the next months and years, we'll see something happening. And as I say, I'll keep you updated in regards to that. But Raymond will be able to tell us locally how he's doing with some of the challenges he faces there. I'll pass across to you, Raymond, just now.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning. Yes, just touching on the schools element, we have youth engagement penciled in for later in the summer. We have a youth development fire skills course potentially running August, September. That will involve persons from the school. We also plan to engage with 5th and 6th years, hopefully just after the summer holidays, to look at the potential for recruitment. But as we're all well aware, in the West Highlands, it's a very difficult one because they tend to drift off to university to further their careers, and they'll be away for 4 or 5 years, then maybe a wee bit longer, then come back. That's the kind of time we'd probably look to sort of recruit those members. However, people that are wanting to stay and do apprenticeships or local employment, absolutely we'll engage with them and try and get them on the recruitment pathway for the fire service. Say it is quite a challenge in the West Highlands, but as Mike says, it's a national issue, this, and the RVDS strategy group is working on it at the moment. But hopefully with the restart of the fire skills programme, that should spark an interest in the younger people, and hopefully we'll try and get some recruits from that. As Mike touched on, Broadford and Poultry are an area that is a concern for me at the moment, and I would actively look for this group to support us in engaging with the community councils to try and get the community to take some responsibility for it as well. We are putting all the recruitment materials out. I've got an appliance going down to the square this weekend in Poultry to try and engage with locals, do leaflet drops around the houses. That's just a level of engagement that the service is doing, and we just look for the community to try and support us in that.
Okay, thank you, Raymond. Okay, Mike, is there anything else you want to come back with?
It's okay, Chair. I'll just answer the last couple of points. So the Councillor MacLeod there had indicated about the increase in tourism and initiative for, deterring wild camping, fires, etc., things like that. last year in particular, a lot of the campsites were closed, where we got such an increase in the wild camping. So we're finding that obviously as they've opened, it's a little bit less difficult this year, shall we say, for and some of the issues that we had. But what we do have is we have a number of social media campaigns which cover the whole aspect of be careful when you're burning campfires. We are talking about tents going on fire. We've looked at barbecues being disposed of. Locally, we had a wee bit of an issue. I know it's not our area, but up in Wester Ross, we had an issue with barbecues getting disposed in bins, and it was causing fires. So these kind of things are being proactively put out there via the social media channels. There are also a number of our RVDS support watch officers going around the campsites, dropping off leaflets. Ian Nicholson, for example, has been around some of the ones in Broadford and Poultry and so on and so forth, dropping off the tenting and good practice guides. So that should help in regards to that. One of the other aspects that we've looked at as well is, particularly now with the warm weather, is actually entry into the water, to be careful in amongst the water as well. So that's another one that we're doing. So these are part of our what we call our thematic campaigns, and we will do these every year. But we are very acutely aware that in the West Highland particularly, we have those issues around people just stopping and getting a barbecue or lighting a fire at the side. But I'll be honest with you, the numbers have been very low this year so far. I was speaking to one of our colleagues in Fort William this morning, and he tells me that the camper vans, etc., are far in excess of what he expected. So I anticipate that'll be heading your way, gentlemen, I'm afraid. Yeah. So we'll look forward to the challenges that presents in itself. So I hope that covers that for you, Councillor. Councillor Monroe, thank you very much for your positive words. And for the group in general, this is at the tentatives. The Poultry build is absolutely a priority one build at this moment in time. Staff in Uig, the Uig, we're looking at trying to run that concurrent with the development, the harbour development.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes, and we recognise that staffing isn't of a standard that we would expect for our employees. And actually, one of the things that we've done there, and is a good success, is we've now hired one of our first female employees at staffing. Okay. So we're looking forward to her engagement in the station as well. So as I am updated, I certainly will keep you informed as a group and via Raymond as well, and keep you up to speed. So that's me, and if there's no more, hopefully that's it. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Raymond. And it'll be good to hear, Mike, how the RDS strategy development goes. I mean, I can remember as a youngster, you know, the gents who joined the fire service was 25, 30-year service, but that profile seems to have changed, and so it'll be good to see what the recruitment strategy going forward will look like, because it has to be different, I suppose, given the way everything else in life is different. But once again, thank you both for your attendance. And it's a very positive report, and we'll see you next time round.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Take care, all.
Okay, members, we're moving on to agenda item number 5. Before we move on to Dawn, can I just say that agenda item 6 is not appearing today. We're going to bring that to the next area committee, the Newton Room development, because there's a lot of things that may happen in between now and the next area committee. So Dawn, you're going to give us an update on education in the West, but in particularly Skye and Raasay. And first of all, can I, on behalf of all members, thank you and all the staff in our schools for the tremendous job and the work they've been doing over this last year and a bit. It hasn't been easy, but I know it's been recognised by parents, by members and the wider community. So over to you, Dawn.
Good morning, Chair and members, and thank you very much, John, for your vote of thanks to the staff and officers across the area. We very much appreciate the help and support of all members over these very, very challenging times, so thank you very much for that. This morning I'm going to give a brief education update, and members will have the opportunity at the end to ask me any questions. First of all, regarding Education Scotland engagement, due to COVID restrictions over the last 15 months, there's been no Education Scotland inspections or inspection reports. So as such, I have no reports to highlight to members at this time. West Area update regarding acting officer appointments. I can confirm the following interim posts are currently in place in the West area. First of all, Area Education and Learning Manager, which is myself. Education Quality Improvement Manager, which is Stephen Hamilton, Head Teacher at Cool Primary School, and Quality Improvement Officer, who's Mary MacDonald, who's Cluster Head Teacher here in Skye at Carbost and Struan. So all these posts are currently interim posts, and we hope that all these posts will be, as we move forward with the new structure, there'll be appointments and everything made before the October holidays. Next, Head Teacher appointment. I'm very pleased to confirm that Mr. Tony Breen has been appointed Head Teacher at Poultry High School last week. Tony is currently Deputy Head in the school and was Acting Head Teacher at Gairloch High School previously. So we'd all like to wish Tony all the best as he moves into this post after the summer holidays. Now I'm going to give you a kind of overview of education between January and post-Easter time in the West and in the Skye area. First of all, key worker support and vulnerable children. From January onwards, education and learning staff have been working to support our vulnerable children and the children of eligible key workers, as well as providing remote learning. So this has been ongoing through the lockdown periods and post-lockdown. Remote learning to phase return to primary and then secondary schools. Highland Council and families have continued to adapt to the periods of remote learning, and here I can report very major successes within Highland Council and within the Skye and Raasay area as well in terms of the positive benefits of remote learning. Successful remote learning continue to be supported by the ICT team and the huge benefits of the Chromebook rollout, and continue to learn and develop and building confidence in staff, children, young people and parents and carers. The remote learning guidance has been shared with Education Scotland and has received very positive feedback. Head teacher empowerment allowed for individual settings and contextualised decision making to take place, and schools working within the guidance framework to implement their local context. There's many examples across the West area and across Highland, and including in the Skye and Raasay area in terms of successful developments in remote learning, and I'll mention one or two of those later when I give you brief updates of achievements across the ESG later on. Area teams have been liaising with school staff to update staff as and when guidance is released by the Scottish Government, and area managers lead weekly meetings to update head teachers on necessary actions, to support schools and to communicate the local and national picture. And the area team continues to support schools throughout this period, along with Education Quality Improvement Manager and Officer, the ASN Manager and Officer, and the early years education support officers and practice lead schools. So it's been very much a team effort, and I'd like to thank all the team for their help and support in these very challenging times. The updated position statement is issued to schools periodically and is based on the Scottish Government guidance and is amended as and when advice changes. And the most recent position statement came out last week. And officers continue to help and support schools and parents implementing the policies and the mitigations that have been developed. And as part of that, there's been a number of ongoing meetings taking place, including at area level with such groups as Education, Health and Safety Team, CCFM, Catering, Cleaning, Transport and Residences. These meetings were fortnightly and they've continued post-lockdown on a voluntary basis. This has been very successful. So I'd like to highlight the very positive operational meeting and the joint working across all the services at this time. It's been very, very positive. We've also been looking at ongoing COVID mitigations and to mitigate the risks of transmission of the virus in conjunction with NHS Highland and colleagues. And head teachers have completed such things as updating risk assessments and ongoing help and support with officers and health and social care team regarding mitigations and looking at helping and supporting. And this has been done very much jointly with NHS, but also with CCM services, transport and catering and health and safety. and has also included linking with a welfare team, supporting the children and families who have been receiving free school meal vouchers, which has been a great success across all areas. So there's been a lot of service connection and collaboration taking place, members, and I'd like to highlight that, and the ongoing meetings of the senior leadership team, the tactical team, and the school reopening transport group, and the ongoing meetings regarding NHS and also the welfare team. Communications has been essential during these periods of lockdown and partial lockdown, and this has been ongoing, and we've been looking at ensuring communications to staff, parents and young people is always up to date and very much follows the Scottish Government guidance. And there's been monthly meetings with the Highland Council, with the Highland Parent Council partnership, to ensure that everybody gets this information. A major focus has been on mental health and well-being support, and there's been ongoing help and support for pupils, parents, staff via psychological services and the CAMS team. So there's been sessions on mental health and well-being, detailed information sheets and PowerPoints have been shared, and also details regarding the digital hub have been shared, and representatives have linked with the Highland Youth Parliament, have surveyed young people, and have met with parents on a regular basis in order to continue to support our pupils, parents and staff. And as part of this, we've got the Just Ask helpline, which is available for people to get in touch to get support and advice. So that's been very successful and continues to be there as we move forward into this recovery and renewal period. Just now, schools, both primary and secondary, are starting to get back to a degree of normality within the current mitigations. However, in secondary school, there's been a huge emphasis since the return after Easter on SQA for the senior phase and looking at assessments and supporting what is now known as the alternative certification model from SQA. And this model is based on demonstrated attainment, so assessment evidence is required. And evidence is currently being gathered through controlled conditions in schools, and Poultry High School are currently in their last week of gathering together assessment information, which will inform the final grades that the youngsters have. There's been a huge focus on SQA help and support across the authority, using help and support of council officers and SQA coordinators, and this support is extended to linking with pupils, parents and staff and communicating with everybody accordingly. The timeline and support documentation has come out, which supports the details of the ACM, the Alternative Certification Model, and includes a framework for the process and also a template for Highland Council following through the quality assurance processes. As part of this, we also had Education Scotland linking with representatives from the Highland Council to look at the policies and procedures we've got in place in order to follow the SQA guidance. So that's ongoing. Okay. In terms of additional support for learning and support needs, practice and resources are continuing, and the current ESG ESN allocation is continuing until the October holidays. Members asked previously regarding projected school roles and some details about that. The picture across the ESG is slightly variable. In terms of looking at Poultry High School, the forecast over the next 10 years is for the school roll to climb to approximately 600, which is still below the position it was going back 10, 11 years or so, but the projected roll is to go up to 2031 to approximately 600. In terms of the primary schools, the picture varies slightly. Broadford, the roll will potentially go up to just over 100 by 2031, and Slate Primary School, it looks with the forecast that the roll could go up significantly over the next 10 years potentially up to round about 90 plus pupils by 2031. And again, Dunvegan, the school roll predictions seem to suggest that the roll will increase until it is approximately 80, potentially by 2031. Most of the other schools, apart from Poultry Primary School, which again the roll is forecast to go up, potentially up to maybe 196 by 2031. Most of the other primary schools, the roll projections are for similar to what we've got just now. We know we have to add a kind of health warning to these roll projections, especially in the smaller schools, where we know that one large family coming in can hugely change the school roll. And we know that any projections after a 10-year period also have to have a health warning. So we can see there that Poultry High School and some of the areas, including Broadford and Slate and Dunvegan and Poultry, the numbers and roll predictions are going up. In most of the other areas, it's largely staying the same, or in some cases going down slightly. Okay. In terms of Poultry ESG schools and successes, members will remember that quite often we have an ESG report and we have a number of different successes shared. In this case, we've asked the schools to give us really one success, or one achievement. It's taking place just now, which I'll share with you just now, members. And we know that this is only part of a huge range of activities and achievements taking place. First of all, we've got an ESG-wide achievement, which links very much with the remote and online learning. It's been a major success. Poultry ESG have had a virtual Rossi trip for the P7s, and this is getting them to work together in schools and across schools over the transition to the high school. And this has proved to be very, very successful, and it has reinforced, obviously, the successes of online learning. So thank you to all the head teachers and staff involved in these successes. And we know, obviously, the disappointments of not being able to have the Raasay trip for the P7s this session. Poultry High School, we can highlight the successes of linking with the Poultry and Braes Community Trust and supporting Taina Drochich in terms of supporting life skills and workforce skills. So that's really good, the schools supporting the local community and working with the local community around that. Struan Primary School members may be aware of the successes of the Ocean School, which had been taking place at Struan, including developing organic seafood fertilizers and sea salt, and also salt butter. And this has been very successful, and this is being sold in honesty boxes, and it's raising money towards the Hebridean Whale and Dolphin Trust. So congratulations to everybody at Struan Primary School for that success, which was shared in the West Highland Free Press. Broadford Primary School has been continuing to work with a selection of partners through the lockdown and post-lockdown, including linking with the John Muir Trust and looking at coastal conservation, but also very much linking with Balfour Beatty in the construction of the new Broadford Hospital, where they're putting together a time capsule. Muir Primary School, I've got an ongoing gardening project, an enterprise, growing and selling a range of plants. So well done to them. Staffin Primary School, some of the members may have remembered the details that were shared previously regarding Staffin Primary School about some of the successes regarding the development of the war memorial and the garden around that. So that was very successful. And we'll have to pass on the successes to Elizabeth McFarlane, who was selected as a Poppy Scotland Learning Champion as part of that for a local war memorial. So the legacy of that lives on, so that's really positive. Elgol and Raasay Primary School are working very, very closely just now on a joint project, again highlighting the successes of remote learning. And here they're linking with the RSPB, and they're undertaking a range of field trips where they're identifying nesting sites and predators, and the importance of identifying the hows and whos when it comes to raising awareness of biosecurity and biodiversity and the risk factor of local birds. It's hoped that this resource will be shared more widely in due course. Also, I'm pleased to announce that they're planning to put together a bilingual board game, which can be used in Gaelic medium schools as a teacher, and also as a teaching aid as Gaelic learner classes as well. So we'll look forward to being able to share that in due course. And again, this is showing the virtual learning opportunities that exist, and that location is no longer such a barrier that we had beforehand. Elgo Primary School, again, members will have seen well publicised a couple of weeks ago in the West Highland Free Press, the great success of Elgo Primary, finishing second in the UK in the recent 5-day Big Pedal Challenge run by Sue Strands. And the school has also been involved in a number of bikeability awards and cycling activities. So well done to Elgo Primary School. Poultry Primary School have engaged in a number of local community activities, including cancer research and supporting the Race for Life. There will be the Race for Life taking place at the King George V pitch on Thursday, 17th of June, as part of their annual summer picnic. So well done to Poultry Primary School for doing that. And also, I'd like to highlight that on the 14th of June, we're joining Poultry High School to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Poultry Primary School. And they're going to be holding a street party in the playground and being supported with Skye Dance on that. So we look forward to hearing more information about that in the future. So quite a landmark, Poultry Primary School 30th anniversary celebrations. Boonscoil Gaelic Poultry. Some of you may have heard about the great success of Boonscoil Gaelic Poultry, winners of Social Enterprise and Education Gaelic Dragon's Den event. So that was a great success, both locally and nationally for the school, and continuing to develop the social enterprises in the school, which I know has been strong across both Poultry Primary School and Boonscoil Gaelic Poultry for a number of years. So that's a great success. McDermott Primary School have continued to support mental health and well-being and positivity. And as part of that, they have a Wellbeing Wednesday, and this links with the Health and Wellbeing programme and links to their home learning programme as well. So that's been very successful. Knockbeck Primary School have been involved very much in a range of activities, but including the engagement programme Corncrake Calling, which the youngsters are linking with looking at the conservation aspects around corncrakes and looking at the local environment around that as well. So that's been very successful. Carbo's Primary School used the Scottish Parliament as a great learning exercise to do different actions and different activities around the electoral system in Scotland, including looking at the pupil voice and the elections and participating in elections and having different youngsters being involved in different parts of that. So that was part of looking at pupil voice, but also looking at democratic processes. So that's very successful at Carbo's Primary. Dunvegan Primary has been enjoying successes with its twice-weekly Forest School sessions, which is using funding kindly donated by the Dunvegan Trust. So thanks to the Dunvegan Trust for supporting Dunvegan Primary as part of that. And Edinburgh Primary were successful in bids for the Big Lottery Fund and Keep Scotland Beautiful, enabling them to purchase a polycrub for their Forest Schools area. Again, that's continuing to develop. Boonscoil Slateshire has had a number of different successes, and we'll highlight the ongoing successes that they have in developing their outdoor learning and developing their forest schools and their school garden as a place of learning and a place of play. And also as part of that, they're developing their knowledge of local wildlife. All that's very, very important. And in early years, they're looking at the virtual nature school, and they've been shortlisted for an award regarding some of their outdoor learning and play. So again, very successful achievements being highlighted at Boonscoil Slateshire. So thank you very much, members. That's a kind of taste and a review of some of the developments which have been taking place across the whole of Highland Council in part of education, but also sharing you some of the most recent successes taking place across our associated schools groups for Poultry ESG.
Thank you very much, Don, for that comprehensive report. I mean, as Chair of Education, I mean, I do get a flavour of what's happening Highland-wide, but it's nice to get a flavour of what's happening in the local context. Just a couple of comments before I go to other members. It's encouraging that all our head teacher appointments are now secured. I think all our schools now have got head teachers in place, so that's very encouraging. As you rightly articulated there, remote learning in Highland has been well received nationally, and a lot of the national guidance that has gone out has been based on the work that has happened within Highland. I think what's really important too, and you highlighted there, particularly in rural areas like our own, is that during COVID, the empowerment of head teachers to make local decisions was absolutely essential, and having that flexibility at local level. Particularly when we've got the extent of school transport that we have. So you might want to comment on whether the issues with school transport at the end, Don. I think also you mentioned there the importance of having regular catch-ups with schools and sharing information. And I know you were involved in weekly events in the West, and I think that was really, really key. SQA, Highland schools, I believe, are following SQA guidance, again within a flexible local context, but are doing really well. The role information, that was interesting. I think it's good if we could track that over the coming year to see if there are changes. But noticeably, and not surprisingly, role increases are happening when we're building houses. So I suppose there's that natural link. And in terms of school successes, great to see the variety. And of course, the 30 years of Poultry Primary School is of particular interest to me. And having been head teacher there for 17 years, I've had an invite to make some contribution. So whether I'll be singing or dancing, I don't know. My only question, probably on top of the school transport, Don, would be round about school lets and the return to after school activities and the importance of being outdoor and involved in all of these with health and well-being activities. Can we try and make sure that we push forward the opening of buildings after school and weekends to facilitate that? You can give me a wee update. What we'll do, Don, is we'll go down the other members and then you can come back and answer all the questions at once. So I'll go to Councillor Monroe now.
Martin Don agus Tapalib on the Hajj. Thank you for this report. Really all-encompassing, really great to come into work this morning and hear all these achievements. Makes what we all do as terms as local representatives all the more satisfying. And so congratulations to your schools and for these achievements. I think, as Councillor Finlayson said at the start, we've just got to acknowledge how challenging the last year has been for all our staff, for our head teachers, for our teachers, for our assistants, all school staff, and particularly for our children. It's been a really challenging year, and all staff and children have shown remarkable resilience in a context which has been challenging, but there's words you use there, Don, which I'm not surprised about, but are really encouraging in terms of teamwork, interagency teamwork, the support which agencies are giving to schools, and the joint working. So all these are just what I expected in a sense, but just good to hear that how it is happening and get a flavour of that. The question I had was about transitions, and you answered that to an extent with the virtual Rossi trip. I know how much that is enjoyed by primary sevens and has been enjoyed over the years. I was just maybe wondering, is there anything else in terms of transitions, even Scolari, nursery into P1, P7 and into Poultry High School, in addition to the virtual Rossi trip, which can be done to just to settle pupils as they make that transition. But that was a really encouraging report, Don, so more on time.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Monroe. In terms of
Don, will we take Councillor MacLeod? He's got a question, then you can answer them all.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
Chair.
Colin.
Thank you, Chair. I don't really have a question per se, really, Don. It was just to congratulate you on an excellent, very comprehensive report there. A lot of my words are just echoing Councillor Monroe's, and it's just really to pay tribute to all the staff that have worked hard through very challenging times that we've acknowledged, and supporting keeping everyone safe, and also congratulate Tony Breen to his new post. And again, Councillor Monroe's touched on it. I think it was great to hear that the Raasay trip went ahead virtually. I think that's been a very successful trip in previous years. And listening to the rest of your report, it was really heartwarming to hear all the great outdoor activity learning initiatives that were being undertaken there. So thanks very much, Don.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Okay, Don, so it looks like school transport, transition and school lets are the three main questions, I think.
Okay, thank you, Chair. To start with school transport, we've worked very, very closely with the transport centrally and locally during periods of lockdown and periods of partial lockdown and the phasing back to schools. And it's been very successful linking with local officers. Schools have had to link with them in particular at different times with the secondaries in terms of different groupings coming back, and around SQA assessment arrangements and such as well. So all those have been very successful, and I think it's shown very much the good local working and local understanding. We've seemed to have overcome challenges, if any challenges have arisen, and normally I think a lot of it is down to making sure there's effective communications at all different levels regarding that. So in terms of transport and the return to schools, everything seems to be running smoothly. We know that as we move forward next week, we've got Monday and Tuesday for secondaries. The secondaries have got inset days, and the major focus in that is SQA moderation. We know that across the whole authority, there may be some youngsters still coming in for the completion of assessments. And if that's the case, then the head teachers are linking locally with transport officers in order to do that. In most cases, most of the assessments will be completed by the end of this week. Next week also, we've got Monday, which is an inset day for the primary school as well. But in terms of transport, Chair, things seem to be very positive, and if there are any issues, we normally hear about them and try and work with everybody concerned to move things forward.
Yep.
Second one regarding lets, we've had some progress regarding lets, in particular outdoor lets, but as we move forward, we are very conscious still of the mitigations, and some of you may be very well aware of some of the COVID outbreaks that we've had down in Fort William Lochaber area over the last week or so. So we're very conscious about that, and we're linking very much with the health protection team and with our health and safety team around that. There's a small working group being set up specifically looking at school lets, and it looks like the internal school lets won't be taking place until after the summer holidays. Obviously, that will be very much dependent on, again, developments within COVID and the reduction, hopefully, in the mitigations as we move forward. But we know that there's one or two specific queries locally regarding internal lets, and we hope that through discussion we'll be able to move forward with those. But the working group is linking specifically on lets, both internal and external.
And transitions. Callum asked about transitions.
In terms of transitions, we highlighted the strong virtual transition taking forward, but as the mitigations have been reduced, we're pleased to confirm that there will be transitions taking place from nursery into primary, and in terms of from the primaries into the secondary. We know that the high school is organising transition P7 transitions, again, obviously within COVID restrictions, but we're positive to see that that is moving forward. Also, we've had the okay for a number of months that we can have extended transitions for youngsters with high additional support needs who require extended transitions, and we know that that's taking place. So we're very, very positive that we're moving forward as the mitigations are getting adapted to take into account of that. So P7 transitions into S1 will be taking place.
Okay, thank you very much, Don, for both your report and for answering these questions. It's good to see you with the background of sunny Ewing again, and I'm sure it genuinely is sunny today. I'm sure next time we have you back, we'll be looking at SQA and attainment. But once again, on behalf of all the members, thank you for the work you and your team are doing. And once again, pass on our thanks to all the staff and all our schools in Skye and Raasay.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Chair and members, for your ongoing help and support. And I just reiterate the thanks for your help and support, but also that individually, if you wish to get in touch with me or any of the team, please do so.
Okay, thank you very much. Cheers, Don.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Okay, members, we're moving on to item 7 now, the Isle of Skye and Raasay investment plan. And we're hearing from Scott Delgarnos with us, and we know that some people are saying, well, why are we so slow with everything? Why are things taking a bit of time? Well, the reality is that we're reacting to the request made by stakeholders at the last stakeholder meeting, where they felt that we needed to carry out more engagement, but within smaller groups and more specific groups. So we're responding to the requests that were given to us, and I'm sure Scott will confirm that's the case and give us an update on where we are, where we're going in the short term. Over to you, Scott.
Thank you, Chair. And can I just do the nod test that you can hear me okay? Different venue today. So good morning, members, and thanks very much for sparing the time for us to give you this briefing today. The presentation today was really intended to give you the latest position on the preparations for the next stages of the engagement on the Skye and Raasay investment plan work. And as you say, whilst it has been a little while since we had that initial event back in an engagement session, engagement, back in January, we've really taken the time to listen to the feedback that we had and to tailor the next stage of the event to ensure that the investment plan that is presented to you later this year represents a really good cross-section and a consensus view of the people and the interests and of our communities across Skye and Raasay. So what I'm going to do today, members, is share the various methods that we're using to engage through this next stage, the methods that we're using to reach out to people and to give you a flavour of how the engagements will run, which actually begin tomorrow, and there's a series of them over the next couple of weeks or so. So I've got a screen to share, if that's okay. Sorry, bear with me. Here we go. Right. So members, this is the first image here is showing you the website that we're still continuing to use as the focus for attention for all the resources that are going to be made available for the investment plan work. So it's a nice, easy web address to remind people about again and again where they can find all the information they need to know. So highland.gov.uk/Skye Raasay. Where they'll find everything that they need to access on this stage, and indeed what's happened so far as well, and for future stages. So if people went to that website, they'd be able to click on that comment on the investment plan tab, and it'll take them to a fantastic online consultation that's been set up, ready for people to contribute their views. And what we've done is we've listened to that feedback from the last stage about the priorities that people identified, the outcomes that people want to deliver through investments, through things that we want to do for people and the place. And we've reflected on that and allowed people from a broader cross-section to give their views on the priorities that are that they feel most passionate about. So I'm just simulating here the type of quick exercise that somebody can do to read and consider what their priorities are. This will then take them through to developments, investments, things that they would like to see happen on the ground. People will be able to go in and choose their top priorities and give us, a richer feedback on what people think are the priorities for the future. We're also then going to be asking people about, actually, from a kind of public relations point of view, what do you think this should be called as a document, but also as an ongoing process, because we're conscious that this isn't a publication that we're asking to be approved and then to leave it there. It's a process, it's an ongoing delivery process of working together in a different way. So we'll be asking people's views on the kind of the name of the process and the document that's published. It's important to highlight that the online engagement asks for people's details, but not their personal name, not their name and their address. We're simply looking to get a good idea of the type of people, ages, employment status, whether they're in education, whether they're 18 or 80, to give you and us all an idea of who's commenting. And from which areas as well that they live in. So that'll give us a really good feedback for the next stages. The second thing to highlight, members, is that there is a paper version of this same survey that has been created, and special thanks have to go out to, alongside the Highland Council, HIE, and also Architecture and Design Scotland, who are the core project team who are doing the work. I have to extend special thanks to Joe Ford, who is a well-known figure in the community and who's kindly asked to help coordinate feedback from some particular groups across the area. And she is going to be leading that work to take this paper version of the form to reach out to groups who we wouldn't otherwise hear from, to give again a really good rich kind of range of feedback on what people's priorities are for the future. That will all form our thinking and about the next stage of the investment plan. And then the final element to let you know about is that we will be having those events, as I say, starting tomorrow. People will be reminded about the purpose of the intended purpose of the investment plan. We've got a clear timeline to make the most of people's times for what will be a series of online sessions, but they will be smaller groups, as you say, Chair. There was a very big number of people that came to the last workshop, and we want to have really tailored conversations with people about particular priorities that were raised to us last time around, and this timeline will help us to make sure we make the most of their feedback. You'll remember, members, that to start the process off, you agreed a series of outcomes to think about what we want for the people and place of Skye and Raasay, and we've tailored those and tinkered with those to match with the feedback that we had from people from that January event. It's there for discussion today if you wish, but it's there for people to think about how the changes that we've made from the original ones that were approved by yourselves, to make sure that when we're thinking about the next stages of investment, that we're always bearing in mind what we're trying to do out of those investments, what we're trying to deliver, the improvements for people in place. So we'll be taking some people's views on that before then going into the main bit of the session, where the purpose of that discussion will be to get people's thoughts about two things. One is the things that are happening on the ground right now, and the extent to which they feel, from their points of view, that those committed projects, those things that are underway, will address those outcomes. And that will set the foundation for a second stage of the conversation about, well, where next? Where are the gaps? How do you, if we're agreed on those outcomes for the area, what do we need to do next? And if we're to make the most of our joint resources to deliver what we need for the area. So that'll be the main bulk of the conversation to inform the next stages of the investment plan that's reported to you later this year, members. The final aspect will be a discussion, a brief part of the discussion about organising ourselves. How do we make sure that we're working better together in a different way to think about our joint responsibilities for delivering all of this for the future? And that'll be all about, as I say, resources, assets, making connections between things that maybe we aren't already, and working together better, hopefully. And then, of course, as I say, we'll be going through those similar questions about branding and about how we might label this work on an ongoing basis. That's everything I was planning to brief you on today, members, but I'm happy to take any questions about the format or the approach to the engagements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you once again, Scott, for that a summary. And I think, again, it clearly articulates the journey that we're on. And for me, I think you made some valid points about, I mean, this is a living and an evolutionary plan. It's not a plan that will have a final document and a final end. It's ongoing. I think it's good that you've been able to make the paper version available for those who aren't able to access it online. And I think this latest engagement, which is really focused and has been as a response to what people asked for, is really, really critical. And the words I've written down here is that if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And I think what we're doing is we're ensuring that we're getting that feedback, that comprehensive feedback from everyone around the Skye and Raasay community. My one question would be, and I think it's really good that we've changed the main aims and the outcomes to reflect the feedback from the initial bigger meeting. So I'm assuming that after these shorter engagement sessions, we'll have another list of what the aims and outcomes are, which reflect the latest round of engagement. So what I'll do is, that'll be my question, but I'll go around the other members, Scott, and then you can come back and ask all members questions in one go. So I'll go to Councillman Rowe first.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Scott. Thank you for that. I don't have too much to add, to be honest, to Councillor Finlayson's comments. The only thing which, listening to you, Scott, this is so far removed from some people's vision or idea of a plan, an investment plan, where an authority comes in from the outside and says, this is what we need, this is what you need, this is what we're going to do. I just think this is exactly the way to approach it. Shows engagement, shows that we are being responsive as a community, as community representatives. So it's just so far removed from some people's version or ideas. I think it's really is exciting. It's going to be something we all have ownership of. So really pleased with that. Never comment, just I'm really glad that SLCBO and Joe Ford are involved. I think it's a really important dimension to the whole thing, and that extra feedback we're going to get is good. So no questions, thanks. Just looking forward to the next few days ahead and hearing the communities conversing and talking about their plans, and so thank you, Scott.
Okay, Councillor MacLeod.
Thanks very much, Scott, for that report. Yeah, it's been very much, it's just an observation really, it's been very much an organic process with individual community groups, and it's stimulating input and conversation. It's been really positive, and obviously thanking everyone that's been involved. There's been a lot of work going on, ongoing, and I'd just like to add additional thanks to our ward manager, Willie McKinnon, for his invaluable knowledge in the process. Thanks.
Yeah, I think I'd also like to endorse Willie's contributions and his local knowledge, and also that of all the officers that we've engaged with. But I think the key point that Councillor Monroe made is that this is not something that's been done to Skye and Raasay. This is something that they can help shape. And of course, the shaping, the funding, the developing of any projects is not going to be done to them again by the authority or by any agency. It's going to be done in partnership. But this whole working together ethos is what I think makes this plan different and exciting. I don't know if you want to add any further comments, Scott. I asked you about the final version of the aims, and you did articulate that what we're going to call this will also be decided during the workshops that take place in the next few days. And I noticed that Stuart's with us, so once you've given your input, Scott, we'll go to Stuart and he can maybe sum up.
Certainly. Thank you, Chair. And in response to your particular comment, Chair, about the outcomes and the updating of those, we're taking the same approach to those outcomes as we are to the other kind of feedback that we're gathering through this event. We want to ensure that the final product and the process of preparing it has as much buy-in as possible, as early on as possible. Those outcomes are a valuable way of checking in with people that what we're trying to do together meets outcomes, another way of saying objectives perhaps, for the area that we can all agree upon, and it makes a much easier conversation to have about projects, things on the ground, interventions that we're considering, because we can come back to those as a litmus test of success, of whether we feel we've done what people were bought into achieving for the area. So that's we'll feed all that back to you and present what we feel to be a distillation and of that thought process, of that process, and a presentation of what we think is the consensus view that we hear from people over the next few weeks. Thank you.
Okay, Stuart. Good morning, Stuart. Stuart's from High. Stuart, do you want to give your impression of what you've heard and what we've discussed?
Just very briefly, thank you, Chair, members, Scott. Just on the point of revisiting the outcomes objectives, I think very important to note, Scott's already mentioned Architecture in Scotland, but they will independently write up the workshops. So we will have an independent assessment of how we might evolve some of the phraseology or some of the emphasis, and that's critical because obviously we're heavily involved, but with Architecture and Design Scotland's experience of doing similar consultations elsewhere in Scotland, then leaning very heavily on their advice and guidance has been a very important part of the process. So I think just to add up, this engagement is ambitious, given the volume and length of time that we're dedicating to ensuring we try and hear as many voices as possible. Community planning in practice, if I might suggest, I think that's the actual one of the key points. So we've more to do, but it's progressing well. We've got a very busy couple of weeks ahead of us, but we're very much looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. And I think it's worth also mentioning that we're undertaking this at a very difficult time in everyone's lives and an unprecedented time in terms of the pandemic we're living through. So I'm sure what we're currently doing will be viewed from the outside as something that might almost be a pilot scheme and something that other places can follow. So we're doing it at a difficult time. We're doing a difficult job, but I think the engagement is strong. And I'm sure the outcomes that come from all this engagement will also be strong and will have a direction of travel that we'll all buy into. So can I once again thank Scott and Stuart for your presence today, and we look forward to attending the meetings and the workshops over the next couple of weeks. So see you all soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, members, we're on a roll, so we might as well keep things moving. We've got the visitor management plan next, which clearly links into the Skye and Raasay investment plan, and we've got Colin Simpson with us, the tourism coordinator. Just for your information, Colin, Skye has been buzzing this weekend. We've had the good weather, we've had the bank holiday, we've all heard about the camper vans returning, we've all heard about the high volume of traffic, so we couldn't have you here at a better time and on a better day. So over to you, Colin.
Okay, thank you, Chairman, and good morning, members. Members, I thought just to take you through some of the things in the plan, it might be easiest just to pop a few slides up on screen. So if you're happy, Chairman, I'll just share my screen with you. What I've tried to do is just to go through each of the subjects that were covered within the plan, give a little bit of an update on each. And I'm conscious that there's one or two things going on which are not necessarily specifically in that plan. So I've popped in a slide at the end just to pick up on a couple of other tourism things that might be of interest to members. So hopefully this will work okay for everyone. I'm trying to use two screens, so forgive me if I seem to be squinting to the side every so often. So are members seeing that okay now?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, that's perfect, thank you. So there's a number of different sections within the plan, and what I was hoping to do was just, as I say, go through each one at a time, if I can get them to move on. The first of the subjects that we mentioned in the plan was all around roads, parking and sort of related elements. Members will be aware that particularly on many of the single track roads, there were some issues, not just in terms of the kind of normal need for maintenance, but some that were perhaps a wee bit more visitor specific. And I guess you mentioned, Chairman, the motorhomes already. Some of the roads, the passing place signs were maybe missing in certain places, or the passing places themselves were maybe not quite as big as some of the larger motorhomes might like to have. So there's a kind of fairly small additional programme of road improvements included as part of this visitor management plan. And that, of course, is over and above the other road maintenance work that the road teams will be undertaking. I think members are probably also aware that the roads teams have been under a fair bit of pressure in recent years. Some of that comes down to things like winter weather and so on as well. So one of the things they've done is actually appoint another technician specifically to look at some of these visitor infrastructure things. And that person actually, I believe, starts today. And I've touched a little bit already on some of what we'd be looking at with that, and it's replacement of passing place signs, hopefully just to give visitors that wee bit of extra warning that there is maybe a passing place further ahead that might not be immediately visible if the sign's not there, and that should hopefully help the flow of traffic. In some areas, and I'm not sure of all the detail yet, we've still to get that from the roads teams, but there's also a rollout of more of the allow overtaking signs. Members might be familiar with them. It says police notice at the top. They're a blue sign, and it suggests that people should move in to let following traffic pass. Because again, I think we'll all be well aware of the fact that some people on single track roads are not aware of, in a sense, the etiquette that's required. And then on the parking side, I'll come back to one or two of the parking things when I touch on things out with the visitor management plan. But we have also been rolling out a programme across the Highlands of charging in certain car parks, and also some bits of work, particularly around white lining. And the picture you'll see there, I'm sure you'll recognise in Killakin. One of the ideas behind that is that a well-marked parking area tends to actually have a greater capacity because people park a bit more efficiently if you do that. So there's a bit of that happening in a number of places. And just while I'm on the subject of car parks, I was in Poultry myself, or on Skye myself, at the bank holiday at the beginning of the month, and I noticed Bayfield car park looking much better than it was last year. Sadly, maybe not as busy as we would have liked to have been at that time, because things had really just opened a few days earlier. But hopefully that extra capacity will come into its own in the next few months. Probably the big one for a lot of people is that we've used a reasonably big chunk of the funding that was set aside for the visitor management plan to employ visitor focused access rangers across the Highlands. The original proposal there and the funding from the council was initially for 10 rangers, but through a bid to Nature Scott's Better Places Fund, we actually got some additional funding to up that number to 17. The further 7 are all ones that are being done jointly in cooperation with other organisations. All of them have a specific geographic remit, so those additional rangers are in certain places, but one of the organisations we've done that with is Skye Connect. So in total, between the additionally funded ones and the normal ones, for want of a better term, 3 of these posts are on Skye, and they're now actually up and running. The first of the rangers started on the 10th of May, a few of them a little bit later. They've gone through their induction programme, they've been supplied with their vehicle, etc. And probably something that's useful to touch on just in terms of the induction. Unlike many of our normal induction programmes, this wasn't looking just at what's going on within the council, and there were actual external presentations, partly other teams within the council, but partly external in the sense of likes of police and fire service, because the access rangers will be expected to liaise with these organisations as well. I'm sure you're all aware of some of the issues that have been in some of the decent weather that we've had in the past with things like campfires and so on, which sometimes get out of control. So liaison with the fire service and so on is quite a key part of what the rangers will be doing. The first few patrols were undertaken 15th and 16th of May, so it missed the bank holiday at the beginning of the month, but I think we were fairly certain that there would be a much slower start with things only opening from the 26th. And the fact that, unlike the reopening last summer, we weren't reopening right in the middle of school holidays this time, and that we would probably have a more gradual increase in numbers, which I think is what we have seen. But as you said, Chair, I've heard from a few other people already today that this weekend's certainly been really busy, helped no doubt by the fact that things have been open for that bit longer, and also I suspect by the fact that we've got probably the best weather we've had in a number of weeks. So the first weekend, there are a few things that came out of the patrols that the rangers undertook, which I thought was worth touching on. One of them, just as I mentioned, was around campfires. The rangers are also picking up on a few things like minor site maintenance issues that might be undertaken. So that could be simple things like just repairing a gate or a bit of tidying up. They'll do some sort of low-key litter collection, but if there's bigger fly tipping issues, they'll also report that to the waste team so that they can pick up on it. And I thought just on this part, it was probably useful to drop in a tweet here, which our press team picked up on just 4 or 5 days ago. The Rangers are very much taking the approach of advice, education, rather than enforcement. And it's to try and encourage good practice from people, not just at the location that they speak to them at, but when they then go on elsewhere, because we know a lot of people obviously tour around other parts of the Highlands. And it seems that that approach is being welcomed by our visitors. So this was a tweet that we got from one of them the other day. And although it's not shown here, if you actually go on and you see that tweet, a number of people have passed it on to others, retweeting it. And there's also a few comments from other people saying what a good idea. So I think this is being welcomed by people. The next thing that we had in the plan was around some improvements to some of the public conveniences around the area. 60,000, as I think you'll accept, is a relatively small amount. So this wasn't looking at big infrastructure type projects. This was more minor projects that they'd be looking at. And in particular, an aim to roll out more of the comfort schemes to some of the areas that maybe didn't have any provision at all. So we've got a few of them being rolled out and a few of them that are still under discussion. So that will take the total number of public toilets in Highland up to quite a significant number. For all the coverage that we sometimes hear about lack of provision, Highland has by a long way the greatest number of toilets of any local authority in the whole of the UK, even exceeding really popular tourism destinations like Cornwall, for example. And of course, one that will be of much relevance to members locally is the fact that there's the new one at the store, and that's going to be picked up and managed by the council's main team. And recognising that this was a relatively small allocation, there is an application being submitted to the Better Places funding to see if we can get yet more upgrades. Just moving on, but still sort of on the subject of waste, but of a different sort. I think members will be aware that last year, the number of people maybe that were wild camping, the number of people that were informally camping in motorhomes meant that many of them had waste to dispose of and weren't able to do so on a campsite like they might normally do. And there was quite a lot of pressure on some of the litter bins that we had in car parks, at viewpoints, etc. So there was a bit of extra work done last year, but very much on a reactive basis. So this year we've set aside a much more substantial amount specifically to try and tackle that in advance. And that's been run largely through two different approaches. One of them is simply to put out bigger bins, and in some cases that's appropriate, but in other cases that maybe won't work. It may be a factor of the bin lorry's route, or it may be something to do with the type of usage of the site. So in other cases, we'll continue to use some of the smaller bins, but there's an opportunity there to swap them over during the week if, for example, the bin lorry only goes through that area one day of the week. So it's still giving extra capacity. And tied in with that, the waste team have also appointed some more staff. They can do some of that swapping over of bins, but they've also been doing some roadside litter picks. They did quite a lot of that in the first couple of weekends of the month just to get everything looking good prior to people arriving. And I think as a slight aside to that, I think there is a suggestion there that if we look at things across the Highlands as a whole, we can't necessarily point the finger at visitors as some people do and say they're responsible for all the litter, because there was an awful lot of litter to be collected before any of the visitors arrived for the year. So this is looking at both doing things for the communities and providing services for local people as well as for visitors. The roadside clearing has added to the cost even more than was expected. So there's a proposal going forward from the community services team to get yet more funding towards this to try and enhance the service a bit further as the season goes on. This is just an example of some of the additional bins that are going out, and obviously much more of a push these days towards trying to encourage people to separate out their rubbish and put recycling in separate bins where it can be recycled. And we're taking the opportunity at the same time of doing that to kind of push the message of good practice. People have come here to see a beautiful area. please do your bit to try and help keep it that way, I think is the message that we're trying to put out there. Yet another form of waste, and again one that's been quite topical, not just last year when we had all the kind of upsurge in visits after COVID, but something which I think we've been starting to see in the last few years, is a need for waste disposal for motorhomes. Again, members will be aware of a few locations in Skye where there are new sites going in, the Bayfield car park, for example, being one of them. But to try and give us a decent sized network that we can then actually promote to visitors for this year, we used a part of the visitor management plan funding to run a small scale grant scheme for commercial campsites, to say we'll give you a small contribution this year to help you put in place a system to allow you to accept non-residents to dispose of their waste. It is a one-off payment. It's not going to be something we can necessarily afford to do for years to come. But while we wait for some of the new standalone sites to be rolled out, it gives that bit of extra capacity for this year. And 15 sites across Highland, 3 of them being on Skye, have already come back saying they want to participate. And at the moment, that looks like giving us somewhere around 25 sites. And we're working with CAMPA, which some of you may know of, which is the Camper Fan and Motorhome Professional Association, essentially the hire companies all combined to operate through a kind of trade body there. And they have an online map showing all the waste disposal sites that are available to people if they're not staying on a site. We're working with them. We've got a login to allow us to add any new sites as and when they come on stream. And around half the sites in the whole of Scotland are now in Highland. So we've got reasonably good representation there, but obviously hope to get yet more in weeks to come. We're also going to then move into a further phase of trying to promote that more widely. We're talking with CAMPA about maybe giving them in a sense, a small kind of publicity contract on our basis. The thinking there would be that there's so many Facebook groups, etc., out there where people swap around information about motorhome visits, where you can do this, where you can do that, where there's facilities, where there's sites, etc. And the feeling was something that was put out to these sites by the industry rather than by a public body like ourselves might just carry that wee bit more weight. So we're looking to work with them to get them to start posting some of these messages to that market. The last one on the list within the actual visitor management plan was around public transport. And this is very much really looking to trial something this year with a view to potentially rolling it out in other areas in future years. The place selected for the trial, as many of you probably already know, is that Trothernish Peninsula route. Members may have seen my background picture before we kicked off today of the Trothernish Ridge. As a family, we went and used that route ourselves in early May, and I can see exactly why that would be the kind of route that people would want to have that sort of service on, because there were people on the service we were on, they were going up to the store, they wanted to do a walk there, they wanted to come back down, they wanted to pop on the bus again to go on to the next place, Kiltrock or perhaps on to Floddergray or wherever. So it does seem to be a really logical place to trial that sort of service. So that is out to tender at the moment. The companies are due to return their tenders were due to return them by Friday. Apologies, I put this together last week, so they'll now be in and they'll be being considered by the transport team. Of course, running a bus service is only part of the story, particularly in areas like Highland, where the weather's not always wonderful. Usage of public transport services can be influenced quite a bit by some of the other infrastructure around there. Is there a shelter to wait in while you're waiting for the bus, for example? So at the same time, the transport teams put in a bid to Transport Scotland to try and improve some of the infrastructure on some of these routes as well. So that's all the points I had specifically related to the visitor management plan. But I'm aware that that's very much the shorter term ambitions for the coming season. Most of the things we're talking about there are one-off. So things like the waste collection, we're investing in extra collections this year. But if we're to do the same in future years, of course, there needs to be a further budget added for that in future. So I thought it was probably also useful just to touch on one or two of the other things that have been happening around infrastructure rather than the day-to-day management. Again, I know members are well aware of most of these. We've talked about them a few times before. I'm sure you've seen some of them already. But just by way of an update, two of the first Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund proposals that we put forward, Blavin and the parking at the store, are now essentially complete. There were also what they in a sense called the pilot phase ones, which I haven't mentioned here, but some additional parking at East Point and the parking at Fairy Pools, they're also complete. At the store, there was a second phase, which was doing some work on the paths. The RTIF part is nearing completion, and there's yet another phase of the work there underway with support from Skirpid. Touched on Bayfield car park already. Obviously, the actual parking part's now complete. The waste facility is in, but in a sense is still to be commissioned. And then I suppose the looking ahead bit of news around RTIF is that there is a fourth round with a closing date in late September. Expressions of interest have to be in by mid-August, but for organisations that were also seeking a design grant to work up their kind of architectural design, these type of things, there was a deadline for that of the 19th of May. So we put forward a number of proposals for that, and we'll get some feedback on that in the next little while. And then just finally, RTIF, important though it's clearly been for our area, we've got quite significant funding to Highland and quite significant amounts of that to Skye out of the fund. But it's not the only show in town. There have been other ways of getting funding for projects, and I thought it was just worth mentioning the new car parks at the Quorang, which was funded through our own roads team in Skirpid. Similar approach in the Fairy Glen and at Coral Beach. These are all other ones which have been funded, but without tapping into the RTIF funding. And that's it from me. So happy, of course, to take any questions from members on any of these things.
Okay, thank you, Colin. What we'll do is we'll go down members and we'll take all the questions. You can come back and answer them all in one go.
That's fine.
Okay, so park and ride, I think it'd be good to we could get that, announcement up and running. We could get that moving, because I think that's something we have been asking about. The 3 Skye Rangers, we're quite good if members actually had names, contact details, so that we can be in touch with them when we get communities asking us questions. I think that's really important. Again, similarly with the comfort schemes, if we have that information of where they all are now, that again enables us to tell communities and to tell the community at large where the comfort schemes are. A question I've got is in terms of bins, and I came through Broadford this morning, and in one particular location there was a huge amount of rubbish overflowing from bins. Now, funnily enough, the bins were near to a takeaway place. What responsibility have owners of these establishments got in terms of providing additional bins? Or is it just us that has to do that? And my final point is round about RTIF funding. We're still waiting for official announcement from round 3. I don't think it's been announced yet. And again, we might do well out of that. Okay, I'll go to Councillor MacLeod and then Councillor Munro. Callum, you first. Callum MacLeod.
Good morning, Colin. Thanks very much for your report. Slightly outside your remit, but just any input from your vast experience here would be beneficial, I suspect. As part of visitor management, obviously we've spoke about the increased amount of motorhomes, and just looking at road safety as being paramount in the grand scheme of visitor management. I just wondered, there seems to be an uptick in the influx of motorbikes as well, for example. And with the trunk road, which is our vital artery running through Skye, I just wondered if there's anything that you could suggest that would help perhaps get Transport Scotland to engage on any potential kind of road safety campaigns that we could be looking at, and what we could proactively do, collaboratively working together to find solutions for. And also just to pay tribute to the many community groups that have been involved in litter pickups as well. There's been a significant push for that, so I think that's from me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Monroe.
Martin Van, Colin, morning. Thank you. Still morning, it's midday now. So thank you, Colin. Excellent presentation. I just hope that if people are watching this area committee around our ward, they really find a lot of reassurance. They've been well informed. Just thinking where we were this time last year, we were not at this stage at all. We're probably fair to say not expecting the type of behaviour we saw. We obviously didn't have resources in place which we do this year, so that's really good. I think this is, to be honest, this sort of proactive response to tourism is really important in terms of Highland's reputation as a destination. If we're wanting sustainable tourism, we've got to treat people, visitors, well. We have to be respectful, and we have to give them the facilities they need. So we're certainly making a really good go at that, and I think we'll learn a lot from this year. Really good to see feedback on social media which reflects that. I think that, again, social media is so powerful, and I'm sure our rangers will get a lot of credit in the months ahead. Also, I liked to see the link with the Campa. That's really important. I came out from, I was on the top of the Trothernish Ridge yesterday morning, and I travelled to Inverness last night. I passed dozens and dozens of camper vans on the road, so we're going to have a lot of visitors. So that's really, really important. The other thing Councillor Finlayson touched upon is, I think we as elected members have an important role in this. So I think it's important we have sight of just the comfort schemes, contact details, so we can play our role. And what was the other thing I was going to say? Yeah, just maybe the question perhaps is, it's very early days, but in terms of the integration and communication of these rangers, police, ward managers, how is that being set up? Where are we? And again, as elected members, I think we can play a role in that too. So Colin, thank you very much, and I've rambled a bit, but really, really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Okay, Colin, you can respond to you've heard.
Okay, thanks, members. First of all, on the rangers, and there were a couple of points there from a couple of you members. From the point of view of members, we'll be able to get contacts together for you. From the point of view of the wider public, the intention is not to have all the individual numbers published, but there are 2 senior rangers, and the idea is that their numbers will be promoted more widely, and they'll be able to call out whoever's the most appropriate ranger locally when things come up. But I think we probably also have to accept that there's a wee bit of managing expectations to be taken on board here. The rangers are not a blue light service. Somebody's not going to be able to phone up and say, somebody's got a campfire at the end of my road, can you come and stop them? The rangers still have quite big areas to cover, despite the numbers of them that we have. So there's a bit of managing expectation, but they will, of course, try and work with these things as best they can. But both on that, and Councillor Finlayson was also mentioning there the comfort schemes, where they are, and we'll get together something around contacts for all of the different things which are included within the visitor management plan. Who's the right person to contact, what the different facilities and so on are, and we'll get that circulated to everyone. I should perhaps have touched on the fact that there's a report on the visitor management plan Highland wide going to our tourism committee that meets on the 16th of June. So of course, with the timescale for getting committee reports together, the deadline for that's in the next day or two. We'll try and hold off doing this particular part of it for as long as we can, so it's as up to date as it can be, but there will be a bit more of a detailed report going out which picks up some of these things. A Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund, there was an announcement back in, I think it was about late January, early February, of the first of the projects that were successful, but as I think Chairman was commenting on, there were some that were also essentially on a wait list to see if further funding could be found. I think some of those discussions have still to be concluded, and of course we had an election in the middle and a period of purdah for a number of weeks prior to that, so there was a period without any sort of announcements. But I think the Scottish Government have been liaising quite closely with some of the key tourism players, Scottish Tourism Alliance, Visit Scotland and others over the last few days. And I think there's actually a couple of tourism announcements due in the next couple of days. And I'm hopeful that something around that might be part of it, but we don't know anything for certain as yet. And then responsibilities for bins. I think there's a kind of expectation that places like takeaways, corner shops, these types of things will have some way of helping their customers to dispose of their rubbish that they might get from buying products from them. I don't know, I'd need to go back to the waste team to be certain about whether there's actually a legal side to it or not. And even if there is a kind of obligation on them, I suspect in the end of the day, it will also come down to us to have to empty them. And I guess somewhere like Broadford, I can say this a wee bit from personal experience a few weeks ago. If you go in to get a takeaway in Broadford and it's quite nice, chances are you'll drive across the road and park the car and you eat your takeaway there. So you may not actually go back to where the takeaway itself is to dispose of the rubbish. You'll be looking for something near to where you've stopped to eat it. So there's probably a bit of a knock-on effect on our provision as well from that. And then last thing, Councillor MacLeod, you were saying a bit there around, sorry, two more things. You were saying a bit there around the road safety elements and so on. I don't know of specific campaigns related to that for this year, but I do know that Transport Scotland and Police Scotland do cooperate every year on a leaflet and some online presence about safer driving. And I know they've done some targeted campaigns in the past around things like motorbikes. I can see if I can find out if they've anything proposed for this year, but certainly the leaflet they produce, they do try and push that out quite widely to hire companies, and that includes the motorhome hire companies, to just try and give that extra bit of advice, particularly around things like driving on single track roads, which some of these people will not be particularly familiar with if they come from more heavily populated parts of the country. And then the last thing Councillor Munro had mentioned a little around the Rangers and Police Scotland. Philip Waite, who's leading our countryside team, is in a sense in charge of much of that liaison, but they are liaising with the other services on a slightly more local basis rather than a Highland-wide basis. There is a visitor management group that sits as part of the Highland and Island Resilience Partnership, but there are then a number of more area-based groups. I believe at the moment there's in a sense, a South and West Highland one that covers Lochaber and Skye, and our ward managers are involved with that as well. Or Willie may correct me on this, it may well be Dot as the senior ward manager who sits in on that, but there's also an equivalent group in the north. So these bring together police, fire, different council services that are relevant, and Phil as countryside team leader is also on that group, or these groups rather.
Okay, thanks, Colin. Before I go to Willie, was the access officer post that we are awaiting has it been filled? My understanding was that it was going to be filled, and Willie can then come back and confirm about the ward manager. So you can answer both of these when Willie's had his word. Okay, Willie. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to confirm that there's a weekly visitor management operation group on a Tuesday, which covers Skye, Lochaber, Lochalice and South West Ross, and the ward managers attend that along with all the other services. So we can feed back to your weekly ward business meetings as the season progresses on that.
Okay, Colin.
Okay, thanks, Willie. In terms of the access officer, apologies, members. I think we spoke at a meeting before, and I promised to ask the question, which I did ask Philip Waite, but forgive me, I think he'd said yes, it was being filled, but at the time he probably told me the timetable, and my apologies, I don't recall what it was, but I can chase him up today and I'll see if I get an answer and I can pass it on. Can I pass it to you, Willie, just to circulate to members?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Colin.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay, Colin, once again, thank you very much for your report. I think, as Councillor Munro said, the difference between last year and this year, it's amazing. So the council has been responsive. We have been listening to our communities. We're not going to ever fulfil every request or overcome every issue, but we've certainly made a huge difference to this time last year, and hopefully the learning from this year will also impact on how things happen going forward. So thank you and your team again, Colin. And I think also, as Councillor Monroe said, if people across the world were listening or managed to listen to this area committee, they'll appreciate just how much has been done. So thank you once again, Colin.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thank you, members.
Okay, members, I'm conscious that we haven't taken a break, so we'll take a 5-minute break and come back at 1:15. I think we all need to stretch ourselves for 5 minutes. So 1:15, we'll come back in. Okay, is everyone back? Is Alistair with us?
I am, Chair.
Okay. Okay, well, I think we'll start again. It's 1:15. Okay, members, we're moving on to the housing performance report. And we've got Jenny Bruce with us, but I also believe Rory McLeod's joining us. And Rory's taken over full-time from Jim Holden, and Rory will tell us if that's right or not, because Jim has retired. My understanding is that he's finally gone. He was winding down for some time, but I think Jim's gone. So I'd like to record my thanks to the support we've received from Jim. I'm sure he's had a number of years service that I don't know about, but we welcome you, Rory. So I'll hand over to you or Jenny, whoever's going to talk to the paper.
Thanks, Chair. Before I hand over to Jenny, I'd just like to acknowledge Jim as my predecessor as housing manager for North. I officially take over at the end of June. Jim's final retirement date is the end of June, but his last day at work will be this Wednesday coming, and I'm sure he would ask me to pass on his thanks and regards to councillors for their support over the years. But with that, I'll hand over to Jenny for the report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, the housing performance report is within your papers, and it's just really to ask yourselves as members to note the housing performance over the past financial year. At both 5.3 and 5.6, the tables there on repairs, you'll note that our repair timeframes are within the targets of 14 hours for emergency and 8 days for non-emergency. There is still some non-emergency backlog following the COVID restrictions. They are still working as hard as they can to get those cleared. With respect to tenancy issues, our relet times are still as well, well within targets and also below benchmark. We're currently sitting at approximately 3 weeks relet, although that changes can change quite rapidly given our small number of relets that we give. If we get one outlier, it can pop our figures higher. We're reletting around about 32 properties a year at the moment. Under the arrears, you will note that obviously our arrears have unfortunately increased quite a bit. We are working on this. The housing management officers are speaking to housing support, our intensive support officers, our move on teams to try and help people engage and come to affordable and sustainable repayment plans on these. Obviously, pandemic has impacted this quite significantly. A large number of our tenants have been affected, whether that be through furlough or through other loss of income. So therefore, this has impacted their ability to remain on top of their rents. Hopefully, with moving forward on sustainable and affordable repayment plans, we'll start to see them coming down. Might be slower than we would kind of ideally like, but as long as it's moving in the right direction, that's always a positive. There have been changes in how the DWP are processing payments for tenants, direct payments to the council, which is having some impact, and hopefully that will continue going forward. Section 8 on homelessness. Obviously we had quite a dip at the beginning of Q1 for the last financial year. We believe that was due to the pandemic, people not putting folk out or not coming forward as homeless. Obviously it has then increased. We are continuing to see an increase, so I would anticipate that to continue to rise into the next Q1 of 2021 to 2022 once those figures come out. Obviously, again, our hope is higher this year than it was previous financial year of 2019 to 2020. Our capital programme is continuing. There have been a pandemic. There are additional stages within the capital programme and capital works, building in the PPE and safety measures around the coronavirus pandemic. but we are continuing, and will obviously continue to update at ward business meeting and through committee itself as requested. So it's just really to ask you to note our performance over the last year.
Okay, thanks Jenny. We'll go down members for questions. Can I maybe start with, I'm getting feedback there, I don't know why that is. Can I start with the rent arrears? And I suppose it's the support we're giving to people with rent arrears, because I've got in front of me the universal credit caseload by ward, and in the whole of Highland, Skye Northwest has had the biggest increase in the last year of 201%. We've got South Skye sitting at 135%, and we've got Skye Northeast sitting at 119% increase in universal credit caseload. So I think it's understandable why there may be rent arrears. So the question is, Jenny, how are we able to support these people with rent arrears across all services, I suppose, and particularly in our area? And the other point I'd like to make is round about the increasing number of requests that we as members get from people moving into the area looking for work or having been appointed to jobs, and the difficulty they have in finding housing. And I know the importance of making sure your name is on the housing list, but again, it's that whole issue of, is there any way we can signpost them to different ways of obtaining short-term housing until long-term housing becomes available, because we are aware of the extensive house building programme that is happening in Skye. My final point would be, we're building lots of houses, we plan to build lots of houses, but are we still building enough? And we know a lot of what Loch and Skye Housing Association are doing, and we know about Cruachan Place and Poultry, but are there any other Highland Council building plans on the island? So I'll leave these with you, then I'll now go to Councillor Monroe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jenny, for the report, and I want to acknowledge your hard work and the work of your team in this. I think it reflects well on our local teams in terms of repairs, particularly non-emergency repairs, really compared to the Highland average. That's really positive, as is the re-let time too. I thought that's positive. One thing, I looked at these figures for in section 8 for homelessness, and we quick calculations, we have 5% of the population in Highland, but we have 10% of the homeless presentations. So that's interesting. We have got that higher proportion compared to the Highland average in this ward. And just really Councillor Finlayson's points about housing demand. I mean, the market's going strong, but by all accounts, anecdotally, the market's going strong. Prices are high. People are offering over the asking price. And taking into account what we're doing in terms of building across Skye, between Staff and Callacan, Broadford, Poultry, it's not a question, but just that just any comments you have on how we're meeting needs in our ward. Thanks, Jenny.
Okay, thank you. Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jenny, for your report. I think, to be fair, most of the questions that have been lingering for me have been already asked, and it'd just be interesting to hear what you have to say in regards to meeting the ongoing needs for obviously the good work so far that has been contributing to help our social housing needs, and also just really just an issue just on congratulating for us that there seems to be a really good time frame on resolving repairs being carried out. So just to convey that, thank you.
Okay, Jenny, over to you and Rory to answer these questions.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just trying to find the mute there. With respect, Councillor Finlayson, to your comments on rent arrears, both my housing management officers and my housing options officers, when they're talking about people in temporary accommodation, they're referring to welfare support. They're utilising housing support. We've extended housing support in a number of cases beyond the normal short-term intervention times. And Gail Ward, who's our policy lead for housing support, Dawn, who's the contract monitoring officer, and myself are meeting regularly to look at how we can improve the way that we're supporting people where we can. We're also looking at the kind of universal credit side. We are aware that there are an awful lot of people in our community, our local communities, claiming benefits who have maybe never claimed them before. And again, once we know, we would urge people that when they are claiming benefits, if they let their housing management officers know, we can provide them with any additional assistance that we can with respect to that. We know there's an awful lot of difficulty with people moving into the area for jobs or for caring responsibilities, or just because they want to move here and finding housing. With respect to short-term housing, we have temporary furnished accommodation and secure tenancies with ourselves, Lachalch and Skye, to ourselves for temporary accommodation and mainly secure tenancies. So the only short-term are within homeless units, of which we do not have many. With the changes to letting legislation in 2017, obviously the winter let type scenario should no longer be occurring. We think there may be some people who are perhaps taking lets with and putting end dates on, whether that be themselves or the landlords. We're not 100% sure, but we are doing what we can to support people who are coming to us saying that they need accommodation. It may be that some are homeless, it may be that some are not. We know it's not we know it's very difficult. I'm not sure how else we can resolve that. There is going to be a new private rented sector officer within housing. That post was advertised recently. I'm not aware that anyone has started into it yet at this point in time, but they will cover all of Highland and we'll look at that. We're also speaking to Lachalch and Skye about shared equity, mid-market rents, those kinds of alternative options, and they're being built into their future developments. Because we don't do them, they're not built into Highland Council ones. Are we building enough? We would love to build more. We absolutely would. I will welcome any developments we can have. With respect to Highland Council building plans, our own service, obviously we have Crook in place. We are looking to redevelop a couple of other sites in Poultry. We are looking at, I think, down in Ardvassar again as well. We're Armadale, that area. We're looking in Slate. We do work closely with Lachalch and Skye. Ian McKeever, Mo and I meet regularly to discuss that. There are also the area-specific housing forums which Rory attends on behalf of the service. Hopefully we are going some way to meeting ongoing needs. We know the need is far greater than what we are able to provide. I'm trying to think. Looking at, we do know that prices are high, the market's strong, and that people are being potentially priced out of local properties, and that properties that are becoming available at reasonable prices are quite often going for offers over. They're quite often going very, very quickly and with huge interest on them. We think, well, obviously that may contribute towards the higher levels of homeless presentations that we see. The fact that there is very little in the private rented sector out there for people to move into is also impacting homeless presentations, and also to some extent the desirability of living and working on Skye. People, when they come here, they want to stay here, and if they need to, in some cases they are applying as homeless because of that desire. I'm not sure, does that answer everyone's questions?
I think it does. Yeah. Rory, do you want to add any comment?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to comment on the development program in Skye, there is a significant program outlined largely in the strategic housing and the social housing investment plan. But I'm happy to talk to our development colleagues and to come to a ward business at some point to take you through that if you've got any further questions on that. Jenny's point about the universal credit and first-time claimants can't be understated in terms of the impact on people that's been caused, and we're very conscious of the impact on areas like Skye, where there's been significant downturns brought on by pandemic. And as far as we can deliver supportive actions, we're working with our colleagues in welfare to do that. Thank you for your comments on the repairs and relet times. I mean, the performance that you see in bare numbers in front of you is the result of the work of the individual officers concerned, and I will certainly pass that on to them.
Okay, well, thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Rory, for that report. And we do send our thanks to all our officers who have coped remarkably well during this difficult period. So please pass on our thanks to all officers at all levels. And yes, we'd like to invite you to a ward business meeting, Rory. So Willie, our ward manager, will facilitate that, and we'll see you again before too long. So thank you both again for coming to Area Committee, and speak soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Okay, members, we're moving on to item number 10, the environmental health update. And we've got Coila Hunter, the environmental health officer, and John Murray, environmental health officer, with us today. So, hi Coila, hi John. We'll hand over to whoever's going to lead on the paper, and we'll just get on with it.
No problem, thanks. I'll just share a quick slide. Is that coming through okay?
Yep.
That's smashing. Sorry, I'm working for two slides here as well. Just to pick up on an earlier point that was raised during Colin's presentation, there was a question about takeaway bins and responsibilities for not just looking after the waste that's going in there, but obviously making sure they've got sufficient capacity. Within the food legislation, there's a requirement to make sure that they've got adequate and suitable waste disposal. So if you are finding that there are problems or issues with waste in some of the food business operations, if you let Environment Health Service know, we can follow up on that and get it looked into for you. That's grand. In the local team, we've currently got a team of 4, which is made up of 2 environmental health officers. Steve Cox left the service back in May 2020. A couple of months later, we were able to fill that post again, and we've got a new officer, Tanya Grosley, who works alongside Coila Hunter. We also have 2 technical officers. We have a housing grants officer dealing with a lot of the housing grants coming in looking for modifications. And we have a newly appointed private water supply officer who started with us in November 2020 and will work through until June 2022 on a fixed term contract. One of the good things with having a dedicated private water supply officer is that it's allowing a kind of cascade of work responsibilities away from our environmental health officers to free up some of their time to deal with some of the more urgent and pressing matters that are coming in at the moment. The biggest issue that we have at the moment is obviously COVID. Environmental health is directly involved in the response. We have all the enforcement duties over any businesses that are operating in the area in terms of health and safety. One of the key elements that's taking up a sufficient amount of our time is the education element. The process for the COVID response is, they call it the 4 E's, so it's engage, educate, encourage, and then enforce. So it's all about trying to get operators on side rather than just giving them a big stick. So that's really starting to increase now. The lockdown since Boxing Day till about the end of March, there's not really been much operating. A lot of the businesses were closed. There's now quite a significant increase in business activity, and along with that is coming a lot more inquiries, a lot more complaints as well, and that's starting to build. And I suspect it's only going to get more busy as we really start to go into the holiday season, and a lot of the restrictions elsewhere in the country are dropping, and we start to get more tourists coming along. Another element that we're dealing with locally at the moment is dog fouling. Unfortunately, the local team doesn't have a dedicated dog warden, so we're relying on staff coming out from Dingwall. We have a newly appointed officer that started in Dingwall that's assisting with that, so we can call them over, but it does make it a wee bit tricky if there's urgent matters that come out with a dog control issue or more sensitive matters. We have to wait for that officer to come over. At the moment, we have quite a significant case ongoing that potentially may involve prosecution for non-compliance with an abatement notice, and this is involving a septic tank that's adversely affecting a neighbour. So that's tying up most of our officers' time at the moment, and we're having to prioritise. And unfortunately, some of the lower priority items are just having to wait a little bit longer before they get an initial response. Within that group, noise issues which are deemed non-urgent are the ones that are probably going to be impacted the most. Again, full odour complaints are starting to increase. We have a couple of takeaways, and some of the issues surrounding the operation of these is starting to result in a lot of service inquiries about some of the issues about odour. We also have surprisingly a few other septic tanks that seem to be causing problems, so they've been looked at the moment. In the town, in Poultry, there seems to be a increase in sightings of rats. Not quite sure why that's happening. It may be partly because of people have been locked down for the last 3 or 4 months, and the rats have maybe became a little less cautious and are spending more time out and about. And then as people start to venture into the areas where the rats are a wee bit more comfortable, we're starting to see more of them. Or it could be a possibility of, as there's more people going around, perhaps an increase in litter might be just attracting the rats out looking for another food source. So that's currently being reviewed, and we're getting a few of these coming in as well. We currently have quite a significant complaint and issue on Rossi involving a number of abandoned vehicles, and these are currently being looked at the moment. Not entirely sure what prompted the increase. We've got about 4 or 5 vehicles of concern, and it might just be the case that as more people are spending more time in their homes and their houses, and they're starting to appreciate just the scenery, and that these vehicles are now becoming a problem. Some of the vehicles have been there for quite some time, so we're quite confident being able to demonstrate that they're just been abandoned and they're not been left there for storage with the owners expecting to come back from them. So we've officers looking into that at the moment. Again, we've had quite a significant increase in food inquiries. A lot of the businesses during COVID have diversified. A lot of the businesses that would have been forced to close with the lockdown restrictions, like restaurants, have adapted and started doing elements of takeaway. We've also had a lot more inquiries from new businesses starting up, trying to fill that kind of hole that seems to have emerged. And likewise, we're getting a lot of inquiries, although they're coming through as food inquiries, they're on the slant of COVID in terms of distancing and safety measures. So again, things are really starting to pick up, like I say, as we're starting to get into the more kind of traditional busier period of the tourists starting to come back up again. Apologies there. Private water supplies, we have currently 82 regulated supplies. These are supplies which require annual inspection, and these supplies serve around a population equivalent of about 1,000 people. So these are regarded as high risk. All of these will have to be checked out and tested by the end of this year, all things being equal. So there's a significant amount of work involved in that. Again, with the newly appointed private water supply officer, a big chunk of that work is already underway, and we're able to put that to one side, allowed our environmental health officers to focus on the reactive elements of the work that's coming into Skye. On the wider issue across the rest of Highland, we have the food inspection programme. There haven't been any food inspections carried out since the initial lockdown away back in March 23rd in 2020. This was a direction from Food Standards Scotland, with the exception of any premises that were of significantly high risk, so our approved establishments would still be checked out on their programme, and any what they call intelligence-led visits. So if we're getting complaints about a significant concern, we'd do the visits in these instances. But the routine programmed visits haven't been put out since March last year. That programme is now going to be restarted, and it's got a scheduled restart time of 1st of September. The concerns we have at the moment is our officers are flat out already, and we're not doing inspections, and there is a real concern that once we get back to the kind of normal bread and butter of environmental health and these routine inspections, we are concerned about the impact it might have for the reactionary work that's coming in at the moment. Another element of the work that we're doing, ever since Brexit on the 1st of January, any businesses now exporting food to the EU require to have an export health certificate, and these are issued by Environmental Health for fishery products. Our officers, both Tanya and Coiler, have been helping out with Inverness Hub, which is a weekend standby service for businesses requiring certificates on a Saturday and Sunday. The initial thought was that the hub would be quite busy. There was November, December and January speculation, and there was high demand from local businesses wanting this service. Subsequently, there's been a hub that's been set up down in the Central Belt to try and collate a lot of the product that's getting exported from all over Scotland, and many of the businesses in the Highland area are using that hub. So it's the demand placed on the hub for ourselves in Inverness is quite reduced, which is good in a way, but the concerns are if that changes quite quickly. We also have caravan site licensing underway at the moment. We're emerging into residential caravan sites, which have to be approached to license under a new regime. We've got a dedicated team having a look at that, and for local sites, we'll draw in the expertise of the area site officers as well. And amongst that caravan site licensing, we've been assisting Colin Simpson and other people from planning, building standards and roads. We've helped to develop some guidance for the new airs that have been used for motorhomes for a single night stay over. And that guidance should be going out shortly. Another big thing for ourselves is just making use of social media, trying to get as much information. We've found a lot of the information we're getting from COVID guidance. It's changing quite fast, and traditionally we would do mail shots, which is proven quite antiquated, and it's just not fast enough. So there's massive inroads trying to develop environmental health's kind of media presence using the council's own Facebook and Twitter accounts in a bid to try and get more information out to the public in a timescale that's beneficial for them. That's just a very, very quick flyover, and I just invite any questions you have.
Okay, thank you very much, John. That was useful. Alistair and Willie, can we make sure that members get a copy of all the PowerPoints that we've seen today? I think they'd be really good to have one as records of what we've heard and points of reference. And I think it's important to state that probably that was really illuminating. I probably didn't realise just the number of areas that environmental health cover. So it is a fair old list there. So first question, let's get a dog warden. John, why shouldn't we? I mean, if Dingwall have got one, we should have one, because we've got a lot of dogs here. Abandoned vehicles. What defines an abandoned vehicle? Is it where it's positioned? If it's in somebody's private ground, what if it's on somebody's own ground and it's just abandoned and it's unsightly? Can that cause some enforcement? So really that question. And private water supply, my comment there would be, should it not be the owner's responsibility to carry out testing and show you guys that they've carried that kind of thing out? So these are just 3 comments I've got. What we'll do is we'll go round the other 2 members and then you can answer all the questions in a one. Okay, I think it's Colin McLeod's turn this time first.
Oh, thanks very much, John and Coiler. As Chairman says there, it's illuminating to hear what you've offered us to digest with the vital set, and you've demonstrated what an invaluable service that you provide. it's great to reacquaint with it. Just a couple of questions. There used to be an issue with scrap cars over the years here that the fluctuation in volume was kind of dependent on the scrap value. So whenever you found the scrap value was high, there would be less of an issue with scrap cars and vice versa. I just wondered if that's still the case, if there's a correlation there. And just one of the issues you raised there over septic tanks. Obviously, there must be, now that you've mentioned it, there must be circumstances where these come into your attention, and I just wondered how you police that. Thanks.
Okay, and Councillor Monroe.
Thank you, Chair. John, thank you for your presentation. I think it's really important here to acknowledge the role which environmental health have played in the last 14-15 months in terms of the pandemic and the workload which has come with that. Really, quite come out of the blue, and you've really shown how important that service is. So thank you for that. I want to just say to Coila, this report, this paper we have is absolutely excellent. One of the best I've seen at Area Committee. Thank you, Coila. In terms of the background and also local current issues with real specifics, that's really helpful. That's what we're interested in, what's happening locally. And again, looking on Highland-wide issues, again, that's really, really important for us to know too. So it's an excellent report. I don't have any questions. You've covered everything. My only, I want to echo Councillor Finlayson's remarks. We need committed time for a community works officer, dog warden, something. Having children who play in parks in Uig and in Poultry at King George V, there is issues, and there are serious health issues, never mind the unpleasant nature of it anyway. And it's not visitors, it's people not being responsible locally. So I think we really have to, to support our communities and ask for that commitment of time to do something about that. So thank you.
Okay, John and Coila, do you want to respond to what we've asked you?
Yeah, just on the abandoned vehicles, in terms of what's classed as abandoned, the term abandoned is quite misleading because it just assumes it's just been left there, but it's the actual enforcement's under the Refuse Amenities Act. So think of it as an attempt to dispose of the vehicle. So if the vehicle's somebody's just trying to dispose of it altogether. Now, many of the vehicles we see are effectively nuisance vehicles. They've been left there for an extended length of time. But when the owners are approached, they would claim that they haven't dumped the car, but they're hanging on to it, like you say, for the value. And that becomes a difficulty. Where the ones we're seeing on Rossi, one of them sat pretty much in the same spot. It's been moved maybe a few hundred yards, but it's effectively sat there for some period of time. There's another one that's joined it, and the condition of the vehicles, if they're broken windows, flat tyres, if there's enough signs to clearly indicate that nobody's coming back for these cars, then we would just class them as abandoned. We can put a notice on them and then have them removed. If they're on private ground, then that gets a wee bit trickier because we have to ask the landowner, and they have the option to refuse the vehicles being removed, but it would be their responsibility. The abandoned cars is always a pain because they are a bit of a footer to get rid of. But like you say, if the scrap value is high, then everybody gets rid of them. And at the moment, I think it's quite poor. So yeah, the place is getting littered. Some businesses elsewhere almost use it like an end of life disposal route. I think Caithness and Sutherland last year, in 2019 as well, had quite an issue. There was a coordinated project with DVLA, the police and environmental health. I think they lifted, well, what they did was it was before the bunker was sold, and they secured that as a place to act as a pound. And I think they filled the pound in the first morning of doing the Ross and Cromarty area and ran out of clamps. So yeah, every now and again we'd look to approach DVLA and the police and see if there could be a coordinated project to focus in one area. So if there are significant numbers, and we tend to do reports, check the rest of the area, and may go back to these organisations and agencies and bring them in. In terms of the private water supplies, in terms of asking if the owners were responsible, the owners are responsible. What happens is the sampling regime places a legal duty on the owners of these regulated supplies to get them tested. We would conduct a test, and they would get charged for the service as well. So it's like a source of revenue there as well. Councillor MacLeod, you'd asked about scrap cars and the value and the volume. I think we touched on that earlier there. Yeah, typically if the value is high, there'll be no problem in getting rid of them. The second question you'd asked was the septic tanks and how do we police. We don't necessarily go out and about testing and checking for them. The public would normally come to us if there are issues. What we tend to find is in a lot of the rural areas, many of the septic tank systems will be decades old, right back to the 1940s and 50s when they were installed. And they may work, they may not. And it tends to be when there's a change with more and more modern houses. The water demands are much greater than what they were maybe say 40 or 50 years ago. So people will have maybe 2 toilets, 2 showers. They might have a dishwasher, and these things can really impact on how the septic tanks work as a biological environment. And if that gets knocked off with really caustic chemicals coming from a dishwasher, or if they're just overloading it, then you start to get smell issues and overflow issues. So that's what brings it to our attention. But once we're aware of them, we just investigate them and treat them on a case-by-case basis. I think that's everything that was asked. I don't know if I missed anything there.
No, thank you. Can I maybe just ask one more question about septic tanks, and that's the capacity that we have in terms of emptying. Now, we're looking to support maybe some schemes in Skye, comfort schemes, and what they would need would be additional emptying. But what we're finding is that there's no capacity. Scottish Water don't seem to have the capacity. I'm assuming there must be other private companies who would be able to offer additional capacity. Is that information that you can maybe find out for us? And has the council ever thought, well, this might be a money maker for us?
It's a difficult one. Scottish Water tend to be the kind of go-to. It's really difficult in these, ironically, the rural areas where the septic tanks are in highest demand, and getting them emptied. It's a bit of a mix. We're having this same conversation with a lot of the guidance that was produced for the heirs, the motorhome stopover sites. The difficulty is it's quite infrequent. Even Scottish Water maybe recommend only emptying maybe say once every 2 years. It's not a frequent element. If the septic tank's been used properly and it's been managed properly, you shouldn't really need to empty it maybe every 3 years. Ideally what should happen is the majority of the solids going in there should break down, and when you're emptying it, what you should be doing is just taking out the solids that sink to the bottom. Often what happens is people install maybe say inadequate septic tanks, or the septic tanks are really badly managed and they almost start operating like a cesspit. So effectively all it is just a holding chamber for waste, and they just empty it once a year. And it's more about managing how you use a septic tank, that it should be able to run properly. And again, I was going about the age of these tanks. Some of them, what they would do is the old systems, you would have a main receptacle, a main chamber. You'd have all the water and solids going in there. The solids would sink to the bottom. Then through time, the water would seep out through an overflow and go through a large soakaway. Now, these soakaways have a finite life, and normally a good soakaway might give you 15 years. And then from there, what you'd be looking at doing is digging out that entire area. Now, you're talking an area maybe say 20 foot square, maybe 10 foot deep. These are not small by any standards, but generally that just doesn't happen. So what then happens is the overflow, the soakaway would get saturated or blocked, and then that's when you start to have the septic tank malfunctioning. And then you get into this cycle of just periodic emptying. So it's almost like it is a septic tank installation, but they're treating it like a cesspit rather than a septic tank. And because of the way they've evolved, there just isn't a demand there to go out and get it. Scottish Water, again, it's a symptom of being on Skye and being further out. It's just not economically viable to send a single truck so far out. The hope is that with more and more of the stopover sites and the possibility of local businesses taking advantage of some of the relaxations that planning are doing to allow them to start up their own local airs, there may be increased demand in these far-flung areas. You might start to see more and more businesses opting in to come up and collect these tanks.
Okay, I know what I've got to do this week. I know what I've got to check. You've just reminded me. Okay. Coila, is there anything you want to add from the local perspective before we finish?
No, not really. I had the only thing is the rats issue in Poultry. I actually had a meeting with Jenny Bruce from Housing just to go over kind of what's happening, what they're aware of. They weren't aware of anything. They hadn't had anything through their systems. I'm actually going to approach Maura Greenshields of the waste team. Just we think the Viewfield Square issue might be linked to the high school and the kids at lunchtime. What I'm proposing to do is see if Maura can assist with a litter pick, just to see if it is, if that is causing an issue or not. I made Jenny aware of one particular household that there's concerns of harbourage happening. So I assume that will be for her to take forward if they deem it necessary. We've had no further complaint in addition to these ones. So touch wood, hopefully the increase in the activity of the tourists might put this at bay for a wee bit for ourselves. Unfortunately, it's a problem that we are not going to be rid of.
Yeah.
It's just down to management by households and businesses eventually. As John was saying, obviously with just everything shut down over the last year, they become a wee bit more brazen and a bit more used to us. So yeah, that's all from the local that I can add just now.
Okay, well, once again, Jennifer, Kyla and John, thank you very much for that report. You got the plaudits from Councillor Monroe, and I know Hugh Gardner, who's coming on next, getting a wee bit worried whether he's going to get the same plaudits. I'm sure he will. But thank you both very much for attending, and thank you very much for that comprehensive, well laid out report. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and thanks so much.
Okay, last but certainly not least on our area committee today, with his excellent report, I'm sure, it's the burial ground capacity, and we've got Hugh Garner from the bereavement services. And Hugh, we know this is an issue that's concerning a lot of communities. So we've got your report, but you just want to talk the report initially and give us some high points or low points, as the case may be.
Good afternoon, members. Yeah, the report lays out quite clearly some of the issues we're facing, but I'll maybe deal with them first. There's concerns, or there's problems in Skye and the islands which are unique compared with most of the mainland. That is the geology, particularly land is another big issue, or more of an issue than what we have in the mainland. We'll also get SEPA. SEPA's guidelines are relatively strict, but they are guidelines. So far, in the projects that are current, we can get no more at the moment than 10 burials per annum. Now that, we need to improve upon that. We need to find land that allows us to get 20, 30 plus burials per annum. Land availability, that's really down to more commercial decisions within the community and the landowners. There's obviously great demands in Skye and the islands in particular regarding land and land availability versus burials and commercial enterprises. And that's something we're working very hard to overcome. And the geology. Unfortunately, Skye, we've recently completed in the last 2.5 years Poultry Phase 1, which gave us 90 additional layers. But in reality, because we can only go single depth layers, that equates to 45 layers. Now, for a town and a catchment area the size of Poultry, that is not a huge amount, and that's why Phase 2, Poultry Phase 2, is looming high on our list of priorities. Resources available and has been increased for 21-22 and 22-23. In addition to that, we're carrying forward any spend that hasn't been spent in the previous year. There's various reasons for spend or not spending. One is, the biggest one is the design and land availability concepts. The design's got to got to match SEPA's guidelines and requirements, and the land availability has also got to be something we can deal with. What the Chief Executive Officer has done, we are now looking at a situation where we can be more flexible rather than sticking to a strictly, we work in a 6-year and under policy as far as capacity goes. So if you're over 6 years, that's considered a relatively comfortable at the moment. If you're under 6 years, that becomes a priority list. But there are ones that jump up every now and again, especially now we're looking very closely at our capacity figures, which are held at local office, compared with the physical capacity on the ground. So you can get the odd priority jumps out all of a sudden. But this paper demonstrates that we will be looking to be as flexible as possible to make a capacity issue it might have been unheard of. Now, capacity issues are relevant to the population. If you have a situation where a hamlet or a village has got its own burial ground and there's 12 layers left, then it sounds like 12 is very, that's not very much at all. But in reality, if you look at the figures, we only have one interment per year. So you've got a 12-year capacity. That's quite a simple way of doing it, and possibly oversimple. It's not quite as there's other areas of concern that can kick in there. You could have a situation in Mottle Hamlets where you could have an outbreak of COVID, God forbid, or you have a car accident. So that can impact a smaller hamlet in what it would, say, Inverness. So that whole thing's got to be taken into consideration. So really, that's as much I would bring up to your attention as SEPA, geology, and land availability.
Okay, thank you, Hugh. And I'll say I like your report because it clearly articulates where the pressures are. And what we'll do is members will maybe come in, with areas that they're involved in or their local areas. The point you made, Hugh, about no more than 10 burials per annum. Is that SEPA that say that a particular area can only have 10 burials per annum, or where does that figure come from? In terms of land acquisition, we clearly need to see if we can support you with that. But what are the other things that you're doing to try and determine where you can get a land acquisition because of a pressure? And I'll just mention Ashig because that's in my part of the island, not far from where I was brought up. And we know how anxious the community are to try and get an extension to Ashig. So it's really maybe an update about Ashig, Hugh, and where we are with that one. Then you can answer them all at the end. So we'll go to Councillor Munro because I think you've been dealing with Dunvegan and anything else that you want to bring up, Callum.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I can't but praise you, Hugh, for this report after praising Coiler so highly. But it's very, very informative, and it's a very, very important report for our communities. And again, people listening in to our area committee, it brings home where we are, what needs to be done. And Hugh, you've also just outlined the challenges which you face, and as elected members, we want to engage with you and help with you at every step. Looking at Appendix A, there's two cemeteries, probably the most high priority, one in Keilor-Vialich and in Staffin, and that's only got 1.2 years left. And I wonder what we can do there. Maybe you've got an idea about that. Also Dunvegan, similar 1.2 years remaining in that cemetery. The community council are now aware of that. They're considering any options. Obviously, they would like to remain adjacent to the old current cemetery. But obviously, like you're saying, there's issues with landowners priorities for their land, commercial opportunities against creating a cemetery. So just any thoughts you have on Dunvegan and Keela Vialach would be appreciated, Hugh, and thanks for your report.
Councillor MacLeod, you got a question?
No, I think it's really just an observation. Thanks very much, Hugh. And again, it can't be understated the vital service that you provide in our communities for the provision of, having these during very difficult times for families, having what we need on hand. And it was really just, I know you've went into some depth in the challenges, which they're considerable, but it was just to pay praise to the Broadford, which is near me, Broadford Cemetery, and that you've obviously made inroads in an expansion there, and it was just again to give thanks for that.
Okay, and maybe just to mention, Hugh, that you've also articulated that where some small investment will increase the capacity of some of these cemeteries. So that's, again, good news. But you've also got, there's also the ones that aren't quite so easy where we need to acquire land. So over to yourself, Hugh, to see if you can give us some feedback on these points and questions.
Okay, Councillor Finlayson, I'll start with yourself. SEPA, the guidelines of 10 per annum are based on the soil type. And as it stands at the moment, without exception, so far to date, and the 5 or 6 projects that's underway, SEPA have come back and said only 10 interments per annum. Now that's a discussion that's got to be, we've got to have that discussion with SEPA, because we've got to accept the geology of Scotland isn't going to change, regardless of what we do. Although most of our cemeteries are close to the sea in Scotland, that's because some of them have sandy shores. So, the soil lends itself. So it's no, just per chance that we have these burials close to the shore. Over the years, it's been easier to dig. The soil's been better. It's been sandier, so it allows for better drainage. There is a question with the drainage, because you can either have peat's not a good thing, not because of the drainage, quite the opposite, as in clay. But SEPA don't like clay because it prevents any drainage at all. Whereas ideally you want some drainage in the interment. Peat is a no-no because, or it's not ideal because peat moves. And you can imagine that could give you a problem in 50 years' time, where you think you've done something, in actual fact, it's not quite what you thought it was. So SEPA, the guidelines are 10 at the moment, and we're working on a 10 simply because it's yet to be challenged. There's got to be examples where that can be taken up to 20. In a lot of cases, 20 in most of our burial grounds, with the exception of Inverness, where there isn't a capacity problem. 20 would do is fine. That sort of size of figure, because of 267 burial grounds we've got, our population is spread quite wide. So if we get 20 interments a year, that would be something we'd be quite happy with. Talking about Ashig is something that, as you've been involved to an extent yourself. We're going to be having discussions with the grazing committee about a possible site on the opposite side of the road from the existing burial ground. We've evaluated the existing burial ground, and the rock just makes it totally, we can't even go single depth. Where the burial grounds exist at the moment was, it's just we've been fortunate to find a shelf of soil, but we've exhausted that shelf. So we've looked at every alternative. Ideally, you'd want to put the extension close to the original. So we will be meeting with the local community. We've got to sort out access rights, how we're going to breach the site, and how we leave the site. So that has to be agreed, negotiated before we actually get on site. But that's imminent. So Ashig is something we're actively looking at. Another point you made about the small investment. We're looking at, and I'll come on to this a wee bit with Councillor Monroe's response to my response to him regarding staffing. We have now discovered, looking at our records, what's physically available on site is far greater than what our records state. Because the records that we hold at office level, area office level, are based primarily on the initial site, not taking into account the actual curtilage of the burial grounds. So a large piece of land was bought, 60 layers were developed, and that 60 layers has become a definitive point. In reality, we could end up with 250 layers. So for a small investment, we can make that happen. So burial grounds, we thought there was an issue, won't be an issue with a small investment. And that's where the flexibilities coming in. So that's going to take us, that's going to deal with quite a few cemeteries and burial grounds in Skye. Dunvegan, ideally we would want to locate a burial extension close to the existing burial ground. That's proven to be a problem because of water, rock, and peat. SEPA also prefer a level site, but that's not a deal breaker. If all we have got is a hill site, that's what we'll end up using as long as the soil type is suitable. But close to Dunvegan, we could have small parcels of maybe 10 foot square we could exploit. But that would be very piecemeal, and I really don't think the community would be too happy with, we're only producing enough layers in each small bit for, 10 burials. I mean, that's just no, that's no something we're going to look at all. Going on to Councillor MacLeod's Strath, Strath's worked out quite well because the Forestry Commission have a piece of land they wish to sell, and it's a piece of land we wish to buy. Test digs have got to take place there to make sure that the land is suitable for interments. We're quite hopeful there because obviously right next to it, the other side of the fence, we have land which has proved to be very successful. But failing that, we also have a large part of the existing site we currently use as a car park. Now, at the time when that car park was put in there, it was for reasons in the main road. So people, so we've lost a fair bit of the capacity, but that capacity could be moved so that the new piece of land for the forestry, if it wasn't suitable, that could be used for a car park. So Strath isn't an issue at all. Strath is just an investment issue. And hopefully, with a small amount of money we hope to spend, we will increase the capacity of the Strath Broadford by 75%, which is a good figure.
Okay.
I think I've answered.
Yeah, okay. Just one more question then, Hugh, about Ashig. Is the car park in Ashig an option, using the car park and then looking to create the car park outside the boundary of the existing?
We have tested the car park
in
previous years before my time. I'm assured by the local burial foreman that it was found to be just rock underneath it. And that's one of the reasons it was never used in the first place. Because it seems a bit strange. It's a lovely flat piece of land. It's right next to the burial ground. But the local foreman feels that as soon as you get down 2 foot, you're hitting solid rock. And there's not a big issue with the rock, apart from the cost of, digging into it. It's a huge involvement. So if we can find something just across the road, which has got the soil type we need, that would be our best option.
Okay. Okay, Hugh, once again, thank you for that report. I think it shows us very clearly where the pressures are. It also indicates your planned timescale for doing projects. Obviously, we've got a responsibility to try and support you in the land acquisition, and we'll continue to do that. And I'm sure it'll not be long until we have you back to give us another update on where we are with the Skye burial grounds. So once again, we appreciate your time and your work, and we'll see you soon. Thanks very much, Hugh.
Okay. Good afternoon. Bye. Okay, members.
I think that brings us to the end of our area committee, unless Willie or Alistair have anything to add. Okay, members, I think that was a busy morning, a productive morning. And once again, Willie, if I could ask that were sent any PowerPoints that were shared today, if we could have access to these. Thank you all for your contributions.